I like to think of passing by value as the way methods communicate with each other, specifically how a main method can get objects to a helper method. Every time you call a method, it creates its own little world, its own little area that will come blank at the start. Anything you need that will not be created in that method has to be passed in through as a method parameter. You have to give this information to the method in the brackets when you call it. The information has to pass through the brackets, so that's probably where the name passing by value comes from. The value part means that you get exactly the value that was passed through, so you get what was given. If you give your method a primitive data type, like an int or a double, which has its own memory slot, you will get a copy of the memory slot, because you can't have references to primitive data types. The reference is the data. If you want to pass an object, you won't be giving the method the object itself. All you can give it is a reference to the object, a pointer that will tell it where the object is. So the method makes a copy of that reference. It makes its own reference to the same object that was created outside of the method. Let's run through an example of this. Let's say in my main method, I create a double d, which I will give the value of 1.5 off the top of my head. I'm also going to create a string s, which I will give the value of hello, and a time t with the default constructor. Time is a class I've just made up. There's nothing you can or should know about it already. Don't worry about it. It's a custom class that I have just invented. It will have the ability to increment the time. So now our main method has created a data slot with 1.5 stored in it for the double, a reference s to a string containing hello, and a reference t to a time that is blank. Now I'm going to call the method passing by value, which I have declared lower, and give it the parameters d, s, and t as information to start with. The main method will have created a memory space holding d, a string object containing hello with a reference s pointing to it, and a reference t to a default time object. When called, the method pbv, which stands for passing by value, will now make a double num with the information of d that have been passed in. So pbv now has a double called num with 1.5 stored in it. It also makes a string kind of reference called word pointing to the same thing as the string s is pointing to, which is currently hello. And it also makes a time reference, hour, pointing to the same object that t is pointing to. Now that the helper method has made its own references for all the items it's going to use, it can start handling them. But it made copies with the same principle. It made copies of what it was handed. But once you try to manipulate those copies, they will react differently. So if I say increment num by 5, it will do exactly that, increment num. But since num has its own memory slot, it will change the version of num that it has, and not d in the main method. Since primitive data types don't work with the reference pointer and the actual object scheme, and that the reference can stand in for the actual information, it modifies only the num version because it doesn't have a pointer that points to the memory space of d. So to make this quite clear, only the version in the helper method will be changed and not the one in the main method. So unless you return the information, it will be gone when the method ends and nothing will have changed. Next, we're going to take the string reference word and set it equal to what it was first value was plus world. So this will give you hello world because word had a value of hello. Strings are a special case because of the way they behave. When you set a reference of a string equal to something new, you might think that you're changing the value of the string stored, that the pointer is pointing to, but actually you're reassigning the pointer. You're creating a new string, completely different no matter how similar it is to the old one, and reassigning the pointer to point to the new one. So in this case, word will now refer to a new string which exists only in the helper method with the value of hello world. S will still refer to hello in the main method. If we use the hour reference of the time object, it leads us directly to the actual object, which is outside in the main method. So we could do hour.increment by 60 minutes, for example. Here the method follows the hour reference to the time object, which is outside in the main method. So once the helper method passing by value has finished, in the main method, the time will have now a time of 60 minutes, because it is the same object which is referred to by both pointers, so it will have been modified. And lastly, if I were to put something such as increment d by 1 in my passing by value method, it wouldn't be able to do it, because although if you look in the main method at the point where passing by value happens, something called d has been created, passing by value itself doesn't know what d means because it's not part of the world that passing by value has created. It's outside of the world, so it has no access to d. So by the end of running the passing by value PBV method, num will have a value of 6.5. Word will have a value of hello world. Hour will have a value of 60 minutes. D, however, will still have a value of 1.5, and S will still have a value of hello. Time refers to the same object as hour, and therefore both of them will have a time of 60 minutes.